Nova Scotia students in Nova Scotia universities, and we are committed to keeping their tuition at or below the national average. And we have certainly been able to keep that commitment. And we are doing everything possible to make university education in this province, post-secondary education in a more general sense, affordable and accessible to Nova Scotians, and we're committed to that and we will stick to it. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, how is gutting $75 million out of core funding to our universities supporting a more affordable education system? It's not, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, tuition is going up in this province, especially when it comes to undergrad and graduate tuition. We've seen that. Stats Canada has spoken about it. And I just want to read this here. High tuitions are a deterrent to many bright and talented young people who want to acquire post-secondary education. Families are struggling to help their students pay for university. The NDP will continue to fight for lower tuition in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, that came from the leader, from the Premier when he was leader of the opposition. How quickly those promises failed when this government took office, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it's not what this government's doing. Recently, the graduate retention rebate was cut by $13.8 million, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister commit to directing that $13.8 million plus the $5.5 million recently announced to much-needed upfront grants for students?
Good job. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 2 years, our province has invested $48 million new additional dollars to support students attending post-secondary institutions in this province. That's a record to be proud of. That's the highest contribution that any government has made. And certainly, we are very proud of these efforts. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on March the 5th, Talbot House closure was abruptly announced by the Minister of Community Services. At that time, arrangements were made by the Minister of Community Services to transfer 14 individuals in varying stages of addiction treatment that falls under the mandate of the Minister of Health and Wellness. Given the Minister of Community Services displayed her sensitive and caring nature last week by saying virtually nothing about the availability of current programs and services to clients, I am wondering, what role did the Minister of Health and Wellness play in ensuring that the ongoing treatment of clients who had been receiving treatment at Talbot House has been adequate?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Talbot House falls under the jurisdiction of the Department of Community Services, and I would refer that question to the Minister of Community Services.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated before, Talbot House is run by a board of directors. We are the funder of Talbot House. The board of directors made a decision to close Talbot House. We took care of the residents that were on site. There was approximately 5 to 6. We found another location for them, and so we took action to make sure that their needs were being taken care of. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister can point fingers at the board all she wants, but the fact is she's responsible for treatment not only of the current residents, but also for those who are seeking residential treatment with options that are quickly dwindling. Mr. Speaker, the options to provide residential treatment for individuals with addictions in this province is decreasing at a rapid pace. Recovery House in Antigonish, a 28-day recovery program, had its funding discontinued by this government. Talbot House closed. Compass program, another 28-day intensive structured residential treatment program, closed under this government's mandate. My question to the Minister of Health and Wellness, how will wait times for individuals with addictions who need intensive structured treatment go down when the options available for this type of treatment in this province are disappearing?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, addiction services are very, very important services to have in place for people who need to go through withdrawal, often through a residential-based program, Mr. Speaker. And then we can provide a variety of options to people, including ongoing treatment and follow-up. And frequently, these programs can be done on an outpatients or day program basis, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the COMPASS program, the members started to ask me some questions about that yesterday. That program was not being fully utilized. 40% of the time, the beds in that program were empty, although we were funding it. It wasn't a good use of resources, Mr. Speaker. We have now redirected those resources into the detox program, the inpatient program, and in fact, the number of days that people will be able to be in that program will be expanded, Mr. Speaker, threefold. So in fact, we're reinvesting in a model that will see better treatment with better outcomes for people, including our inpatient program, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kings West on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that structured residential treatment is, for many, the best option. The government has dismantled addiction treatment options in this province without ever having released a mental health and addiction strategy. It's like the minister is hoping these individuals who do not respond well to community-based program just go away. How will the minister ensure those requiring structured programming to deal with their addictions are able to get treatment in a timely manner?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, we are taking a variety of initiatives to improve access for greater number of people in Nova Scotia, be they children, youth, or adults. Faster assessments, expanded treatment, appropriate treatment, treatment and services that are based on evidence for what works, what will be effective, and at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, more people will be seen without having to infuse resources. We're using resources in the system more effectively, and we are investing strategically, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Justice. Yesterday we learned that on November 15th, the Department of Community Services knew that an alleged pedophile was employed as a bus driver for the East Preston daycare. The Department of Justice was the obvious source for this information. Will the Minister tell us what exact date he became aware of the risk to preschoolers at the daycare?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, and I want to thank the member for that question. I just want to add to my colleague's position on this is that the important fact here is that when there's allegations or alleged actions made in our communities, is that a report is made to the appropriate police agency, and in this case it was done. And I have all the respect for the police officers in this province, but a common thread that seems to be coming from the third party is that they lack confidence in the qualities and skills of our highly professional police officers, and that's a bit disturbing, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Inverness on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we would have confidence in this Minister of Justice if he could provide us a date. So, Mr. Speaker, we have placed great emphasis on this matter here in question period because the allegations of past abuse by this individual are very disturbing. If they are true, we are concerned another young person could suffer the same experience. My next question, what steps did the minister take to protect the children when he knew that they were in the presence of the alleged pedophile?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure all Nova Scotians that I, as the Minister of Justice, take any actions that are aggressive or violent against a child or abusive in any manner, and I take that seriously. And the Department of Justice acts promptly on all allegations and issues, and as my colleague had mentioned, on the date that her office became aware, they took the appropriate action by notifying the police and then allowing the process, and she did that immediately as reported in the House, and I stand by my colleague's comments.
The honourable member for Inverness on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, parents want to know that their children are protected from alleged pedophiles. Who from the Department of Justice met with who from the Department of Community Services, on the phone, in person, or by email, and what information was conveyed to protect these children?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another part of this whole process is that our judicial process is well respected, highly professional, and does an excellent job. Public prosecutions, who are an independent body, look at all issues such as this that come forward and look for the substance in regards to allegations. Remember, we must respect allegations while at the same time ensuring the rights and safety of all children. I take that job seriously and I act on those matters promptly, and I have all the confidence in the steps that were taken to this date.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, in the first 3 full months of this year, there have been 10 reports of shootings by the Halifax Regional Municipal Police. The issue of violent crime has been brought to the Justice Minister's attention in this House by myself and others on numerous occasions. But as of yet, the Minister has failed to take any proactive measures in developing a violent crime prevention strategy for both HRM and the province of Nova Scotia. Now, my question to the Minister is, why does the Minister refuse to address violent crime in the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for the question, and it gives me an opportunity to outline that as Minister of Justice, I take all matters that deal with violence seriously, and that over the last year, and I reported in the last time this House sat, is that I've been meeting with colleagues throughout the justice system. In fact, I've recently met with the police, both the RCMP and the Halifax Regional Police, and I compliment them on the strategic steps that they're taking to do enforcement when violent incidents are occurring. And I want to point out to Nova Scotians that they are doing a phenomenal job when a violent situation occurs. I'm going to stop my answer at this point, and I will add more when he gets his next question to outline some other key points that need to be outlined.
The honourable member for Richmond on his first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we don't have much to say. I guess it's best to pace yourself to try to stretch it out a bit more. Mr. Speaker, ironically, this is a government which is very fond of strategies, as we heard of 5 new ones in the throne speech ×4. Mr. Speaker, we have seen from this minister quite clearly is that he's only interested in reacting to events. Mr. Speaker, gun crime is a very serious issue and is one that only seems to be getting worse as the months and years continue. It is an issue here in the Halifax Regional Municipality, but it's also one that's affecting lives throughout the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians need to know that the Minister of Justice is taking measures to ensure that gun crime is addressed once and for all. Mr. Speaker, yet after almost 3 full years in office, we have nothing in the terms of a proactive strategy to address violent crime in this province. So my question again is, when will the Minister stop reacting to issues and develop a strategy which would address violent crime in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I will take some time to speak a little longer, and since the honourable member has put an invitation out to me to go beyond just a brief answer and give a more in-depth answer, and I'm very happy to do that, Mr. Speaker. I want to outline that some of the steps that we've taken in direct regards to domestic violence. And recently I just spoke and gave an overall presentation on the strategic plan that I, as Minister, and the Department of Justice are giving. We gave that at a forum. I guess I should have put an invitation out to the member, my colleague there. I also want to point out that in that presentation that I did, we talked about collaborating with some of the best practices, and there's one that we identified in Chicago under the ceasefire program, and we're working with the municipal police department to bring in this program that addresses violence of this nature, that the research and the academic support around that shows that it works. We're looking in that, sir. We're also expanding the restorative justice initiative within the province. And we are a world leader in this area. We're partnering with Dalhousie University. And I will say more to tell about all the good things that we're doing in the next part to a supplementary question. And I thank the member for his question.
The honourable member for Richmond on his final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, it's ironic because it took 3 full years to have the minister stand in this House and talk about the Chicago experience that they're now going to try to implement. Nova Scotians are asking what took so long and why isn't this addressed 3 years ago? Mr. Speaker, the reports from Halifax Regional Police speak for themselves. January 1st, very first day of this year, a shooting at the Metro bus terminal in Dartmouth. January 11th, several gunshots in the area of 200 block of Ross Street in Halifax. February 6th, police respond to report of shots being fired in the area of Demetrius Lane and Victoria Road. March 24th, shots fired near Grafton and Carmichael Streets. April 2nd, a man had been shot in Dakin Drive in Halifax. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious issue that for years now, the last 3 years, we've been calling upon this minister to put a strategy in place to allow our police officers and our communities to be able to battle gun crime and to make our streets safer. So my question again to the minister, why will you not announce a formal violent crime prevention strategy for the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. There's just so much in there that I could talk about and say into the great things that the Justice Department are doing, that the municipal police departments are doing, that the RCMP is doing. Taking 3 full years, it's a matter of looking at some very complex problems and working. The issue of violence in our society is not something that occurs overnight or that has occurred overnight. It is not something that's exclusive to this community and this community alone. I am very confident in the quality of professional services by our police departments to deliver services. And one area that I spoke about is the Chicago ceasefire program. Those types of programs take time, and I hope that he would trust and respect the judgment by our police leaders and our justice colleagues that they're making some sound decisions there. Also, on the restorative justice and expanding that program, and working, for example, with Dalhousie University on a pilot project where we can start to look at reducing the impact on our police officers in the community to deal with crime so that they're freer to work on some of these other issues. But the main part of dealing with violence in society is dealing with the underlying causes, and we're working on that. I want to say I can hear from my colleagues about giving a speech. The member, my colleague across there, asked me to give more detail. They can't have it both ways. It seems to be typical.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last fall, the president of Michelin Canada, in an unprecedented move, came to Law Amendments Committee condemning the NDP's first contract arbitration, calling it a threat. So, Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister of Labour and Advanced Education. Since ramming through first contract arbitration last fall, has she or the Premier had any follow-up meetings with Michelin executives about their future investment in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, if the timeline was since first contract legislation was either voted on in here or was implemented, no, I have not personally had any meetings with representatives from Michelin.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that forthright answer. Mr. Speaker, on January 26, 2012, Michelin announced it was suspending its Hungary expansion over government policy, saying, and I quote, "The attitude of the current government, the new taxes and the new laws make the economic environment unpredictable." And I'll table that, Mr. Speaker, when I finish my questions.
Even in Hungary.
Mr. Speaker, at Law Amendments Committee last fall, Michelin Canada President Dana LeBlanc said, simply put, it makes it very difficult when you have legislation such as Bill 102. And the instability in the legislation, it makes my job and other people's jobs very difficult to sell Nova Scotia as a better place to invest in. So, Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister, since passing this risky Labour legislation, has Michelin indicated to the Minister that it will make future investment in Nova Scotia, or do NDP laws make the economic environment too unpredictable?
Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
I can state quite emphatically that all businesses in this province, small, medium and large, benefit from a stable labour relations atmosphere, and that's something that we are working towards. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria de Lakes on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Tuesday, Michelin announced plans to hire 500 workers, build a new plant, and expand an existing plant in South Carolina, not in Nova Scotia. Mr. LeBlanc said that our province's labour law doesn't help me build a case for Nova Scotia in the future, and that South Carolina has shown that it is pro-business. So, Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Premier. Will the Premier admit that since his first contract arbitration legislation is stifling business growth in our province and putting 3,500 good Michelin jobs at risk, will he rip up his risky law before it's too late?
500. Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the legislation that came into effect just a short time ago, and before that was debated here in the legislature, of course, is a very good piece of legislation. Some 80% or more of Canadians are already covered by similar kinds of legislation, Mr. Speaker, and it provides the kind of stability that the minister mentioned. The reality is I have a lot of contact with officials at Michelin. I talk to them regularly. I just recently spoke to Pete Selleck, who was the new North American president. He wanted to talk to me about the plants here in Nova Scotia. He expressed his confidence in those plants. He indicated to us that they continue to have a world-class workforce. There continues to be great opportunities in Nova Scotia, and that expansion in this province, of course, competes within the Michelin family for work. In South Carolina, the plant that they are building was actually built on a site, just to give you an example, that was purchased and made ready for Michelin some 13 years ago. And so it takes a long time for them to get the approvals for capital expansion, and that's part of their internal process. Mr. Speaker, I've made it perfectly clear to Michelin we look forward to working with them. We expect to work with them in the future, and we expect that they will continue to invest in what has been a very good set of plants for the province of Nova Scotia and for the company of Michelin.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice was recently quoted in the Chronicle Herald as saying, quote, "Anyone who thinks building more jails and putting more people in jail is a solution, in my opinion, they're delusional," end quote. Mr. Speaker, these comments are ironic considering the fact that building more jails is precisely what the federal Harper Conservative government is doing through Bill C-10, requiring the provinces to build more jails at taxpayers' expense. My question to the minister is, can he explain why this is the first time we are hearing of his opposition to building more jails?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I want to thank the member, Mr. Speaker, for that question. It's an excellent question. This government made a decision to replace 2 aging facilities. At the time of going forward with building and with that decision, we also looked at the impact potential that C-10 may have. So we took a strategic approach and looked at taxpayers' dollars and how to make a decision that may deal with current concerns with flow within our correctional facilities, plus deal with potential future issues. There is a distinct difference between ideologies from where I sit on building. If you build it, you will fill it. So my position, Mr. Speaker, is that we're building one that meets our current capacity and deals that we anticipate as future impacts in this province. And I think it's very important that we look at the taxpayer and all these issues, because it's their money we're managing.
The honourable member for Richmond on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's refreshing to finally hear the Minister of Justice. What's unfortunate is that when we called upon both him and the Premier to stand up to the federal government and tell them the province of Nova Scotia will not have taxpayers' dollars going to build more jails to suit a federal policy of the Harper government, they both fell silent. Neither the Premier stood up, neither the Minister of Justice. Yet other provinces, the Premier spoke up, Ministers of Justice spoke up. Ontario, for example, calculated that if this bill is implemented, it could cost the province of Ontario an extra $1 billion of taxpayers' funds to go build jails for Prime Minister Harper. The question is, why was our Premier...
Order, please. The time allotted for oral questions put by members to ministers has expired. Before I finish up on the question period thing, I would like to make a reference here to one of our former speakers who will be well aware of Murray Scott. And I'm going to say that on October the 16th, 2003, Speaker Scott ruled that respect to a letter, the Speaker observed information that would reveal the author had been removed. He ruled that any document that is not tabled in its entirety is completely and therefore out of order. Speaker Scott ruled that thereafter any member who was going to table or read a letter or quote from a letter should first announce that it is in fact signed by the author. Speaker Scott went on to address the issue of tabling printed copies of electronic communications. He stated that electronic communications or emails make up a great percentage of correspondence between the individuals in modern times, and that members receive on a regular basis emails from constituents bringing forward issues and concerns. He requested that all members, when attempting to a reading from emails or to table printed copies from forms of this communication, first ensure that the name of the author is known on the copy of the email and that the member is prepared to disclose the identity of the author and to take full responsibility of the context before it is tabled in this House. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to draw the attention and introduction to your gallery and the Speaker's gallery. We have with us Wayne Adams. Wayne is the first member for the riding of Preston, the first African Nova Scotian to sit in this House. He's been well known across this province, but most recently the province honored him with the Order of Nova Scotia for the tremendous work that he has done in the community. So I'd like him to rise and receive a warm welcome.
We welcome all our guests to the gallery, and I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during the question period today, the Leader of the Official Opposition, when questioning the Minister of Education, used the word bullying. And I think you've ruled on this or brought it forward one day before, and it was resolved with the reaction of that word, Mr. Speaker. So I'd ask you to, if the member doesn't want to retract it now, if you'd look at Hansard and make a decision.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if any way I touch the thin skin of the members across the opposite way from their behaviour, I will remove that phrase of bullying and strike it from the record, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now recognize the House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just for the notice of members, the order that was presented, it will start at 4:27 and will end at 5:27 on Bill number 10. And at that point, at 5:27, we will start debate on resolution number 9 and conclude at 5:59. And we can certainly send an amended schedule to everyone. But with that, I would move that you now call second reading of Bill number 10.
Thank you. Bill number 10 for second reading. I will now recognize the Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise today and speak to Bill number 10. Bill number 10, an act to review the public school programs in Nova Scotia. And this bill can also be referred to as a blueprint for the future of public education act. Mr. Speaker, we know that we have some of our most valuable resources in our schools every day. And we know that we as a province and members of the Legislative Assembly have a responsibility to ensure that we do whatever we can to make sure that the program that is delivered to those students is the best possible program we can do. We know, Mr. Speaker, that there are many good things within the public school programs, and we also know that we can always get better. Any government of any day who would suggest that there's no room for improvement is completely out of touch. So one of the ways that we can look at what we're doing, look at whether we are achieving the outcomes that we want and how we're achieving those is all part of our responsibility as members in the legislature. And the Bill number 10 speaks to some of those key parts of that legislation. It speaks to the goals and policies of public education, public school education. It speaks to the curriculum from primary through to grade 12 and all of the courses within that curriculum. It speaks to the methodologies, the strategies, the initiatives, the programs, the outcomes that we want for our students. These components, these specifics within the public school programs is the backbone and the framework of our public school education system. And so, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, we have looked at this program, and we believe, based on the circumstances that we find ourselves in the province today, we believe that this needs to be reviewed. And with any review, Madam Speaker, there will be some things that will be recommended for change. There will be some things that it will be recommended to maintain. And, Madam Speaker, there may be things that are not in the document now that should be there if, in fact, it is our intent to make it the best document that it can be to guide us through our public education, public school system. We have heard over a number of years, in fact, that the assessments, for example, the outcomes for students on standardized assessments, whether they be provincial, national, or international, we've heard people talk about the results of those. How are our students in Nova Scotia doing? How do they compare to other provinces? How do they compare internationally? And in some of those, on some of those assessments, Madam Speaker, Nova Scotia does very well. So we need to look at what is that we're doing that is allowing our students to perform well on those assessments. The flip side of that, Madam Speaker, is that some of those results are not as good as we would like them to be. And so we have to bore down into that and determine what it is that we're doing that needs to be changed. And a review of the public school programs would provide an opportunity for that thorough review and outcome of that review to set the direction for education in this province in the future. We know, Madam Speaker, that the skills that students need and the knowledge base that students need when they leave our public schools and go into post-secondary are fundamental to their success. We know that some of those skills will be used for our graduates as they go into apprenticeship programs, as they go into the skills trades programs. Some of those skills will be used when they go on to community college or post-secondary, or when they go out into the workforce. And it's that whole set of skills that we want our students to have so that they are prepared, better prepared for the future. We know that the environment they're going out into has changed. We know that there's a huge emphasis on technology. We need to make sure that our students are well prepared, well equipped. And one of the ways, Madam Speaker, in order for us to ensure that we have provided the best possible programming for our students is to take it apart piece by piece and look at it. Look at the policies. For example, look at the inclusion policy. Is the way we are, the model that we're using for inclusion, the best way to help all of the kids in our classrooms? Because the inclusion policy says that all students have a right to be in our classroom. So a review under Bill number 10 would allow us to look at that. We also have to look at the outcomes that we expect students to have at the end of grade 12. Are those skills, the skill set that our students will have, is it preparing them for their next step? Are they going to have to go on and somewhere try to get those skills upgraded so they can pursue their dream or their desire or their ambition? And so that's where the policies and the goals of our public education system need to be peeled away and looked at and determined, are we going in the right direction? Once we know where we want to go, then the challenge is to make sure that the programs that we have in place will in fact get us to that point. So first of all, decide what we want students to have, what they need, and then look at the programs that will help them achieve those goals and those outcomes. And that's where we look at the curriculum, because we have many programs that are designed to help meet the needs of all of our students. So are they working? Are students getting the results that we expected they would get? And if they are, that's something that you maintain. If they are not, that's something you change. But until we take a good look at this, we don't know that. We talk about math scores as an example. We know that their math scores in this province are not as good as anyone in this House would like them to be. And we know that it's not the fault of the students. They're bright young kids. We know it's not the fault of the teacher. They're trained to be and they are dedicated. We know that there's something that we need to do better in order for those students' scores to be improved. All part of the review. Because if you do a review appropriately, you will come out with a blueprint. And that blueprint will have some of the existing and it will have some of the new. The methodologies that teachers are using, maybe there's a different strategy, maybe there's a better way that we can help our kids achieve those skills and those outcomes that we want. We know that not only has technology changed the expectations and the working environment, but we also know that you know, our world is so much smaller now. And it used to be that it used to be that our world was close by. The world is our pathway, and many of us can go wherever we want in that pathway. We want to make sure our students are ready. So, Madam Speaker,
Order.
The intent of Bill 10 is to make sure that we
Thank you. Now recognize the honourable member for Colchester, Guysborough, Shea Harbour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to rise today to speak on this piece of opposition business. The blueprint for the future of public education in Nova Scotia endeavours to do many things in a very small time frame. In just over a month, this bill basically wants a full review of public education in Nova Scotia. At first glance, Madam Speaker, it would appear as if this is quite an undertaking, one that quite likely carries with it a large price tag, which of course did not accompany this bill. But Mr. Speaker, we've come to expect this lack of accountability from our opposition colleagues. This is nothing new. To come up with ideas but to have no plan to pay for them. Madam Speaker, as I said, when I first examined this bill, I was concerned about its scope. So when I discussed each clause in more detail with my colleagues, I was quite pleased to learn more about what the Department of Education has done in the past few years and is working on today. Regarding Clause 2A, the examination of goals and policies, Madam Speaker, I believe my learned colleague from Lunenburg will spend more time in this particular line when she discusses this bill. But I would like to remind all members of this House and all Nova Scotians that upon forming government in 2009, we reviewed the status of public education in our province and took a very close look at where we would find ourselves if the path of the previous government put us on was followed. This, Madam Speaker, prompted our government to put on the brakes. We knew that the path the province was on as a whole was unsustainable. That spending more and getting less was not doing any of our students or ultimately the taxpayers an ounce of good. It was at this point, Madam Speaker, that we reached out to an expert to review our system and use his knowledge of jurisdictions across Canada, which incidentally, Madam Speaker, is what is laid out in Clause 2B of this bill, of the bill we are currently discussing. This expert, Ben Levin, produced strategic advice based on his many years of experience in public education. This advice, Madam Speaker, was then used to plan the course for public education in our province. The plan we call Kids and Learning First. And Madam Speaker, I am prepared to table this plan along with Mr. Levin's report if the House should so wish, but I do believe we all have copies of that. Madam Speaker, Kids and Learning First is not only based on a comprehensive review of the education system in our province, which is the essence of this bill before us today, it goes one step further. The Kids and Learning Plan sees where we are today and plans for how to make it better tomorrow. There are hurdles that we must overcome, Madam Speaker. Our government, and in fact everyone who has a stake in the education of our young people, should always strive for better. As I used to tell my own children, and certainly my students, you need to do your best, strive for better, and always work towards your goals. This is exactly what Kids and Learning First does, Madam Speaker. It sets deliverable and measurable goals that came out of the review by one of Canada's foremost experts in education. Madam Speaker, Section 2, Subsection 2, Item C, asks for a cross-jurisdictional analysis across Canada. I would like to point out to the opposition, and indeed to all members of this House, that Nova Scotia's Minister of Education is in fact the chair of the Council of Ministers of Education in Canada. This honour presents the Minister with the opportunity to discuss the very items laid out in this bill. In fact, assessment is identified as one of the key components of the work of the Council. Madam Speaker, the fact that the opposition bill we are debating today includes work recently completed or consultation already part of the Department of Education's daily work only points out to Nova Scotians that the opposition simply does not do its homework. This was not acceptable in any classrooms, nor should it be accepted in this House of Assembly. Madam Speaker, I would encourage the Leader of the Opposition who introduced this bill to consult with the member for Colchester North, who, while with a different party, was in fact an education minister not that long ago. And even though while that member was education minister, problems in the classroom got worse. And Madam Speaker, I'm happy to table an article from the Chronicle Herald that states just that. As the honourable member just stated just a few minutes ago, that math scores and math results are down in the province. This is true, but the article identifies that those scores got worse under the Tories' watch. Perhaps the Leader of the Opposition could learn a thing or two about how hard the employees in the Department of Education work for the people of Nova Scotia. Madam Speaker, in closing today, I thank this House for the opportunity to discuss Bill number 10 and let the good people of Nova Scotia know that because the ideas within it are in fact relevant, our government, in its usual proactive way, has already completed these tasks. And as my experience, as I can relate, my experience in the classroom is that teachers want to teach. They want the opportunity to have the autonomy within the classroom that is a necessary item for teaching. I need the honourable members over here to be quiet, I think. I'm going to try to control my class, yes. Education, as we have said here many times, is extremely important to all members in this House, and is certainly important to this government and this minister and myself as a former teacher. And there's lots of former teachers here in this on these benches. We feel that education needs the support of all members, and it needs the support so that we can change our education system to make it better. Our education system, has been stated many times, is not working. There needs to be some changes and some revisions in the system so that teachers and students can maximize their learning opportunities. Madam Speaker, excuse me. We know that the system that exists has grown, and it's grown significantly, and therefore it needs to change. It needs to come in line with the numbers of students. It has to take in the realities that exist in this province. As a government, we wish to do this and to make the education system better, to make it more responsive, to the needs of students, to make it more responsive to the needs of society. I am a teacher, and I do know better, and I do know that there is a necessary need to change the system as it exists in this province. I've been in the classroom for 30 plus years, and I do know that the system is in dire need of a fix. And it has to be fixed because the taxpayers are asking for that, the students are asking for that, the parents are asking for that, and they're asking for the system to be fixed. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'll take my place. Thank you.
I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to rise this afternoon and speak to this Bill 10 as produced by the Liberal Party here today. I have to disagree with the honourable member from the other side that our school system is not working. It's by now, if they say it's not working, why is taking more money out of this system going to make it work better? Madam Speaker, our teachers are cut to the limits. They're limited the resources they have. They're limited in what they can do in the classroom because of the resources that are put to the school system. By taking more money out of that system, I can't see where that's going to make a system better that they say it's not working already. I look around the building here today and I see a lot of educated individuals that went through that system. They went through that system at a time where education funding was probably, they say, a lot less than what they're giving them today. But everybody seemed to survive. Madam Speaker, this Act to review the public school program, we as members of this House agree that we have a responsibility to our students. And we as a PC caucus want to see this responsibility so that these people succeed to their utmost ability. We talk a lot in the last little while about skilled trades. Madam Speaker, it's nice to hear that we're going to expand our trades program in Nova Scotia. But we have a school in my riding. We have a school in my riding, Madam Speaker, that has a skilled trades program, and it has had a skilled trades program since 1979. And I agree, they should be everywhere. This trade program has produced valuable and numerous electricians. They've produced plumbers. They produce auto mechanics. They produce welders. I would support that school in Cole Harbour, but we have to build another one in order to do that, because they didn't take the students out of the memorial school when they had a problem with their ventilation system. That ventilation system, Madam Speaker, still sits there. The ductwork is there. We can't get the vacuum system. That system severely handicaps what those students can do in their shop program. They had a school in South Colchester who had the same vacuum system on a smaller scale installed. Now, Madam Speaker, in speaking with the teachers of this program and the head of the department of the program, these students have to go into the shop. They have to cut a few pieces of board. They have to shut the machines down. They have to clean up the dust. They have to clean up the floors. Then they have to go back at what they're doing again. And I'll take my hats off to those teachers. They've done a fabulous job in producing those students there. In their skills competition, these students perform very well, and they perform as good as any students in the province. Imagine what they could do if they had this system up and running, and they could do more time on the machines instead of learning how to clean them properly. Now, Madam Speaker, this school at Memorial is a place called Cape Breton. And Cape Breton seems like it doesn't get that end of it. The government seems like they don't want to put the money into that, while these schools in the mainland are getting more and more and more. $15 million could go a long way into improving the trades program at Memorial. That $15 million could have the vacuum system. I don't care where you'd have to buy it. I'm sure you could buy a vacuum system somewhere in this country for $15 million. We all know the value of an education. We have one ourselves. We all need to take advantage of this in order to improve the future of Nova Scotia. Now, this bill speaks to the goals and policies of our school systems. It'd be interesting to see to what end we're going to speak to this policy. What is the main goal? Is it to make sure we save money and improve the education of our children? If that's the case, I welcome the review. It'll be interesting to see what the details have to say, Madam Speaker. They're going to study the methods and strategic programs and the outcomes. I hope when we do this review, if a bill gets called, it will change the outcomes, it will change how we deliver our programs, and it'll improve the program delivery in our school system. We hope that it'll make us use the resources to the best we have. If we look at our curriculum from P to 12 and all the courses in between, we hope that we can eliminate the courses that aren't being used to their ability and add 2 courses that we're going to need for the future of our province. We know we need skilled tradespeople, but we also need university graduates in engineering and other programs, business, and so on, and we need young people to come up and step up as entrepreneurs. So we want to make sure we encourage that. I would hope that this review was already being done within the Department of Education in some form or another. And I hope that we're comparing ourselves to other provinces. But do we want to make sure, do we want to be the ones that are other provinces? Our education system is unique, and by doing this review, we hope that it stays unique. We have a good opportunity in our province here with the shipbuilding contract, and if we don't educate our students to the degree that they need it, we're going to blow this contract, Madam Speaker. We want to make sure that our people come home from away and return to Nova Scotia and raise their families here. Our business communities are finding it difficult to do that. We hope by educating our individuals that they'll be able to change these policies and make sure that people stay here. We don't want to see more bureaucracy in the education system. We would hope that money would be spent wisely. We would hope that money would stay here in the province to continue to improve the education of our children. It's interesting to see that education being such a priority for this government, but all we've been hearing for the last week or so is the cuts, cuts, cuts. Madam Speaker, as I said previously, cutting the education system and cutting the legs out from kids is not the future we want to take in this province. We want to see all our students succeed, and we do that by making the environment in the school system as best we possibly can. We hope that this review will not end up in cutting frontline people in the system. We hope that we'll be able to find efficiencies in the system to make our students succeed all the better. And we hope the review will provide the students with the tools they need to compete for businesses and jobs in this province and make sure that our students succeed in every endeavour they partake. Madam Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my seat.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to speak to Bill 10. I first of all want to congratulate and thank the former Speaker for his words around his concerns about this bill as we move it forward and the things that he would like to see come out of it in terms of measurables, making sure that any changes we make are improving the public education system in this province, and that is our goal as a caucus, and I welcome his comments. I also want to acknowledge to him, I've also had the pleasure of being in the Memorial High School, where it's been a wonderful program, and when it was introduced a number of decades ago, they also added funding to make sure that that program was going to be introduced, that would be able to operate in the way that it was intended to. As you see now, Speaker, we're talking about that, and I think all of us believe the trades program should be offered in high schools across this province. I believe all of us would like the sons and daughters of our constituents to have an opportunity to experience hands-on work. Madam Speaker, my background is in that. I have a background in a trade, and very proud of that. I've worked very hard. I ran a business, and with that, and with these two hands, I was able to live in the community I wanted to live in and be able to raise two good kids, I think, and in the community where I wanted them to grow. And Madam Speaker, but when the province is talking about adding trade programs across this province and reducing funding at the same time, it doesn't simply make sense, no matter who you talk to. You can't ask schools and boards to do more with less. That's part of what Bill 10 is about. Bill 10 is about looking at what are the outcomes that we want in our public education system, what are the goals we want for our children and our students, what are the skills that they require, not only through trade school, but academic skills that they would require. I listened to the member from Guysborough Sheet Harbour when he spoke, and he talked about I should speak, and he talked about in articles in Chronicle about math scores. Madam Speaker, and I think it was in 2005, 2006, about math scores. And you know what? Members of this caucus and members, quite frankly, of the NDP caucus who were in the House at that time, encouraged the former Minister of Education to respond. And I'm proud to say she responded with the support of this House, and she instituted math mentors. And we saw a change in math scores in this province, Mr. Speaker, but I want to remind the member that it was his government that cut math mentors, Mr. Speaker. When we were beginning to see an improvement, it was his government. So while he suggested that I do my homework, I would suggest before he plagiarizes any staff work on the floor of the House of Assembly, he should research it before he knows what he's talking about, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but I did take from his comments, which I thought was a legitimate question, Madam Speaker. I thought the fact that he said that the time frame was tight. That is a legitimate question to say. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind him that his government hired Ben Levin, who landed in Nova Scotia for a night, then left and gave us a report. But having said all of that, we would go ahead and be more than happy to accept an amendment from any member of the government and law amendments about how we can extend the time frame that are associated with our bill, and we would extend the time frame to allow the proper due diligence to happen. What our bill is talking about is allowing parents, allowing teachers, allowing school board members, allowing members of this House, allowing members of the business community to have input in how we build an education system that responds to the needs of our province, Madam Speaker. I want to encourage members of this House to seriously look at this bill. I want to remind them it was their Premier, their leader, who said in this House that he was willing to look at opposition legislation, wanted us to call it for debate. Madam Speaker, he said he'd be more than happy to move it through to law amendments to allow the public to have their review on it. I think this is a legitimate bill, especially with the timing around public education. Madam Speaker, and the changes that are coming in Connecto, and we're going to hear other changes. We just recently heard today from the Halifax Regional School Board about the challenges they're facing. We're hearing from boards across the province of the challenges that are coming forward with them. We're hearing from a government that wants to add new programs without taking any out, which creates a real financial strain on the system. Madam Speaker, and Bill 10 would allow us to respond to that outside of this House and allow us to do that in law amendments and allow the public to have their input. Madam Speaker, in this caucus, and I hope the members of the Conservative caucus as well as the members of the NDP caucus would want to hear from Nova Scotians, not only educators but parents and students. Right? So, Madam Speaker, in the spirit of wanting to hear from Nova Scotians, I move second reading of Bill 10 in this House.
I recognize the honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise this afternoon in relationship to Bill number 10. The member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour referred to his experience as a teacher in relationship to a response to Bill number 10. I would like to talk for a moment or two about experiences that I had as a school board member back in the 70s and in the 80s. And certainly in those times, we were seeing the beginning of the declining enrollments, and of course they have peaked since then. Now, we in fact have a vision. We have a plan. I have to say that there were no visions and there were no plans, no concrete laid out structures like Kids and Learning First. We, in fact, have a plan. In a debate the other night involving the member for Digby-Annapolis, who I respect a great deal, he knows about charting a course because he spent a lot of time on the water as a fish harvester, as did the Minister of Fisheries. He knows about charting a course, and charting a course is what we are doing with education in this province. Kids and Learning First is about doing things differently. It's about doing things right. It's about better aligning the resources and programs within the province's existing budget while improving learning and student outcomes. Madam Speaker, the province is making a significant investment in public education, $1.1 billion, even as enrollments decline. Per student funding and class sizes are the best they've ever been, and they will continue to stay that way. The average per student funding is $10,372. It's the highest level ever and will increase again by $85 in 2012-2013. And something, Madam Speaker, that I am really excited about is services and supports for students with special needs continue to be protected. And that was something that I advocated as a school board member very early on when we were looking at special needs. And I don't even like to use the word special needs.
noise in the chamber is getting too loud. I'd ask that members respect the speakers at this time. I recognize the honourable member for Pictou East.
I like to talk about student needs. I like to talk about student needs. Government's vision is for every student in every classroom to become well-educated, confident, responsible adults with the skills they need to create and work in good jobs across the province, ready to build a life in Nova Scotia. But we also know we have to deal with the realities of today and the pressures that come with 30,000 fewer students than a decade ago. Today, there are more than 360 teachers in the system. 360 teachers in the system, more teachers in the system than we had in 2001, 2002, when there were, as I've already stated, 30,000 fewer students. And this is really important. This is important. You know, we are under attack repeatedly for a situation that we actually inherited from governments, past governments. That $13 billion debt that we inherited, and as I said the other night, 3/4 of it came from the Conservatives and 1/4 of it came from the Liberals. That is the inheritance. That is the inheritance that we got from those two parties. Previous governments opted to increase spending by almost 42% in the face of rapidly declining enrollments. You know, at this time, I have to tell a little story. I got an interest in politics at a very, very early age, and an interest in education at an early age. And I remember as the son of a coal miner going out and having to collect beer bottles and pop bottles and brand bags before there were even cans, and going around with this bag on my back, and with a cousin of mine, he said to me, "Clary, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a politician." And he said, "Clary, you need a good education, and I think you have to be really smart to be a politician." But standing here, looking across the aisle of this house, I wish my cousin were standing in my shoes today, looking across and thinking about the legacy that we inherited. And you know, I wonder about his young wisdom in looking back. Our government's priority is to focus limited resources on today's classrooms and not on empty desks, and we expect school boards to do the same. And we expect school boards not to play games with the students in the classrooms in Nova Scotia. School boards are being asked to find 1.3% in savings for next year. And this is less than the 1.7% reduction in students the province is projecting next year. Think about that for a moment. Think about that for a moment. 1.3% as opposed to 1.7%. Madam Speaker, Bill number 10. What did we do? What did we do in the past? What did the Liberals do? What did the Liberals do in 1993? What did the Liberals do?
Order.
Roll.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Pictou East has the floor.
I heard the comment over there, we weren't even born then. Well, I'll tell you, many of us were, and many of us have the memories of elephants in relationship to that. And I remember running in those days. In 1993, I ran for the NDP. I ran for the NDP in Halifax, Bedford Basin in 1993, so I know about those days. I know about those rollbacks. I know about those cuts. I know about those mass layoffs. I remember it all, and I remember who was in power at the time. And it was that crowd right over there. They were the ones. They were the ones. And then the other crowd came along, and they did even worse. They did even worse, that other crowd. I mean, we had bad, and then we had very bad. Very bad. Exactly. Going back to kids and learning first. Kids and learning first. Kids and Learning First ensures every child has the supports available to them, and this will be accomplished by supporting 4 goals. 4 goals, you get it? Putting students first, supporting effective teaching in every classroom, preparing young people for good jobs and citizenship, and strengthening the links among schools, parents, and communities. Now, I was very, very pleased to hear that the Leader of the Opposition, and I knew that, he had earned his living and a good living in skilled trades. And this government has a vision in relationship to skilled trades programs as well. I remember being three times at the Halifax shipyard, and to see the tears in the eyes of some of the workers there when the contract was announced. And the skills trade program that we're involved with our vision, with our plan, is being expanded to 18 high schools from 9. This will allow students the opportunity to explore the trades in a hands-on way to enable them to seize the opportunities that come with the $25 billion shipbuilding contract. And sometime, I want to tell you a couple other stories, but I've been given a signal. So my time is running out. Madam Speaker, Bill number 10. We don't need Bill number 10. We have a plan. We have a vision. The course has been charted. The member for Digby Annapolis knows all about that. We are on the course. We are following that course. You don't go, when you're trying to get back to port, you don't zigzag like these guys did, that crew over there, and the zigzagging out there. The member for Digby Annapolis would never get back to port if he counted on any one of those across the floor of this House. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I now recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
I think you could top that one.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to say that I'm pleased to be part of this debate today, but I want to say that I'm not. And I'll tell you why I'm not. The verbal diarrhea that is flowing here this afternoon, I hope there are no kids at home watching this. You know that, Madam Speaker?
Order,
this
please.
does not seem to be a...
Order. I'm going to ask that the member retract that. I would not consider that to be parliamentary.
Then, as per your wish, Madam Speaker, I'm happy to retract that. Probably a better choice of words. Thank you very much for picking that up.
By the level of excitement and engagement here this afternoon, I'm going to ask that the member speak a little louder than he would normally.
Well, I normally do.
Not to stifle any of the support, but it is becoming a little bit difficult to hear, and I recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate that again. This debate has been taken rather lightly, in my opinion, today. And you know, to me, Madam Speaker, I've got 3 girls who are still in school. 1 has already gone through the system. Many of us here have had children, grandchildren, and so on going through the system. What I find to be of interest is, why do we need another piece of legislation to tell us that our children need a better education? We have, I know, and I'll speak for my area, and I've traveled around a bit some, Madam Speaker, we have some of the best educators you'll find anywhere. We have had good curriculums, we have had good outcomes. But I'll tell you, I have recently, last week, visited one of my elementary schools because the principal called. Said, can you come over? I want to talk to you about a serious matter. And we talk about cuts to classroom sizes, and we talk about this and we talk about that. But I'm going to tell you, Madam Speaker, that last week when I went to the Brooklyn District Elementary School in Brooklyn, I had a chance to tour around that school, and the principal there, Brenda Newcomb, was very good at showing me some of the different programs that they offer and what they've offered over the years. And one of the things that people may not know about that school, and I'm sure that there are a lot like this, the extra support that they are providing while going through and having to make tough decisions. The board's got to make decisions based on what this government has given them to work with. And they are making decisions where schools and classrooms are being cut, schools are being closed. Those are tough decisions to make. But in the end of the day, Madam Speaker, it's the children that matter here the most, the students that are going through those schools from primary to 12. There's lots of debate about who does the best, what party did this and what party did that. None of that matters. Not one bit of that matters to one of my kids. They could care less about what party did what, or any other kid for that matter. They care about the education they're getting in that classroom. The parents care about the education that their children are receiving. Now, when you go back to that Brooklyn Elementary School, you will see that they have a specialized room set up to deal with children that are challenged to some degree and have learning disabilities. Part of the problem, however, with this is they're losing a classroom. They are losing teachers. The question is, how are we supposed to continue to do this work, Madam Speaker? Brenda Newcomb wants to know, how are we supposed to find the funds and the teachers and the ability to keep this going? They have EAs, like a lot of other schools. We never had EAs when I went to school, at least not that I recalled, Madam Speaker. This is something that's come along 20 years, maybe a little more than that, and one of the educators might be able to enlighten us on the time frame, but I know in the last 20 years or so, these special assisted teachers, teachers' assistants, EAs, now they're called educational assistants, have been in place working. We don't hear about the work being done in the classroom. All we hear about is the cuts. Go visit your schools. Those of you that took part in the MLA Take Your MLA to School Day would know firsthand and very much up to date on what's going on in the last year since cuts have had to be made. No. When cuts have had to be made in these classrooms, who's affected by that? The little guys and gals coming in the door that need that extra resource. Well, now we talk about resources. And part of the other reason that I received a call from Principal Newcomb was she received, unbeknownst to her and unasked for, a variety of resources from the Department of Education. With no input and non-option, these arrive. Department of Education, the minister says, there's a plan that's been rolled out. They see that that's a benefit. Fine and dandy. They already have all of these things in the class. For questions, they get the little bag. They got kits. I forget just the actual name of the kits, and they come with a little drawer and wheels and a little table. There were 5 dinky cars in it. There was 1 box of 6 crayons, I believe, that came in this, and the price was absolutely ridiculous price. She wants to know, how can we not take that money? I don't need these resources. I have all kinds of books. Books are always good, they accept them. But I have all of these resources. I also have, by the way, no room to put this cart or carts that I've received. She received a cart with no instruction. I believe it was for the gymnasium. It looked like something you might put basketball or volleyball. And the fire marshal says, oh, you can't store that there, it's in the hallway. Well, we have no other place to store it. These are resources that are going out to schools, and you hate to use the word waste or unwanted, but that's what it comes down to, because we're choosing to put these items out and taking away teachers. We're cutting classrooms, we're cutting resources. That's what matters to the kids in these schools. That's what matters to the parents and the grandparents and all of those people who've got children going through, the aunts and the uncles, the people that go to parent-teacher and they talk to parent-teacher. Those teachers are doing their utmost. They're doing their level best with what they have to work with. And I can tell you, in talking to them and knowing a lot of teachers and visiting my schools on a regular occasion and talking to the principals, that's a tough job today. It's a tough job. To see some of the challenges that these teachers face, it's not fun. I know I couldn't do it. It's, I've done jobs that I believe a lot of people would say they could never do in the past, that are tough jobs. But I'll tell you, being a teacher today in this province and in any one of these schools is a tough act to follow. And they need all the credit and all the support that they can get to continue doing what they're doing for our kids. And it's not easy when you see these kids coming in the door that are challenged. And the funny part was, you know, that principal knew every one of them students coming in the door by name. Every teacher, every EA. She knew the issues associated with them. They have taken on their own and built a room in that school, set it aside, a place that's all matted. So when a child with autism has an episode, they have somewhere to put them to calm down. Where's that in the curriculum? Where's that being supported? How will that continue? Because there's nowhere else to get it. How will that stuff continue, Madam Speaker, with cuts to the classroom? And you can talk about all the programs, and you can talk about putting a bill forward that means absolutely nothing when it comes to the hands-on in the classroom. We shouldn't have to be talking in this legislature. We shouldn't need legislation in this province to tell us that our kids need more. We don't need it. We have the resources in those classrooms, and we need to continue with what we have, and we need additions in some schools. Maybe there are some schools, we all hear about the population issue. Some schools have numbers that are lower. I've just lost a school that I went to as a kid, an elementary school, Newport Station District Elementary, and on the other end of my school board, we've lost, what's the name of the school down there? The Annapolis Elementary School? 2 schools in the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board have been closed. Thank God that the previous government put in place a plan that would allow the school board and the community and the school itself an opportunity and a longer process and not just do it overnight. Because the board's recommendations were strong. Close the school and close it as soon as you can. That's going to happen. Unfortunately, that happens. Populations change. We have to make changes in some areas. It's been deemed that that will be the case. What will happen to those resources? What will happen to those teachers? Will they lose jobs or will they move on to other areas? Well, them kids are all going to move on somewhere. They're going to go to 3 Mile Plains, or they're going to go to this wonderful Brooklyn school that I talked about as well, who, by the way, have lost a classroom. We're supposed to be making decisions, Madam Speaker, about next year's allotment coming right up here anytime soon. They've just put budgets forward. April 21st is a magical date for projects and capital expenditures. The boards do have, no question, a very tough job trying to manage the dollars that they are giving. The unfortunate part is there's this downloading system. The province says, here's your budget. We work with you to some degree. I think that's probably a fair statement. The minister has said that she'll put somebody out in one of these other boards and work with them, help them work through their budget issues. There's only so much money in the pot. There's only so much you can do. I'm not making excuses for government. That's the reality of life in this province. There's no question about that. We need to invest, though, in the resources, and we need to put them in schools like Brooklyn that are doing the extras, like Windsor, like wherever, school A, B, and C. Do we need new schools? Everybody'd like to have a new school. There's a discussion about a new school being kicked around in my area to replace the one that just closed and 2 more that are on the on the list for more work. What will happen there? It was just tossed out as an idea. There's been no consultation. Where will the resources come for that? We've got wonderful schools across this province. We've got wonderful staff, wonderful teachers. Where are the supports? We need more, obviously, in concentrated areas, and in some areas, obviously, Newport Station being one of those, that we are going to lose a school. That's tough on any community. We're going to lose a school, and that is like closing a community to some degree, especially a small community like Newport Station. Now, Madam Speaker, when I went to that school, that may not seem like much to some, but when I went to that school, it was jammed, it was full. But those were different days. My parents had 7 children, and we all went to that school, and we were one of the smaller families in the community. there were families with much more. And we see that change. We do see the population change in some areas, but again, not in all. But the question is, does that mean that you should have less resources available? Are those children deserving of a lesser education? The answer is no, they are certainly not. So decisions have to be made as to what will happen within that population. Where will those kids go to school? We hear about cuts here and we hear about cuts there. The reality is there's places that you cannot cut, that you have to support. Healthcare being one of those. That's a tough act to follow. We know that there's waste there. We've talked about that. I've ranted about that before, and I'm certain that there'll be more debate about that into the future. There's also what some would deem perhaps waste in the education system. There's discussion about boards. Should boards be there? I don't know. Who's going to decide that? Should there be less numbers of boards? Well, we're hearing today that perhaps there's an opportunity to make school boards less. We saw the Halifax Regional School Board go with one person quite effectively for some time. Strangely enough, and here we are, we're back to what we have now. Seems to be working. Is it the right number? Who knows? We need to figure out, government needs to figure out, working with the boards need to figure out where the money in education is best spent. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, where that money is best spent is in the classroom on those kids that are attending our schools. With those few words, Madam Speaker, I'll take my seat.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to compliment the previous speaker because of the very important part. As I sat here and listened to this debate on Bill 10, which is a bill of some significance, but of course people watching realizing the old teacher in me is going to say, we're going to support this bill. Well, there's reasons that we're going to talk it out. But the member opposite had the right tone. Too often we stand in this House, Madam Speaker, and attack each other. And there's members of this side of the House, there's members of this side of the House, do not to point fingers, I've sat over there with you. There's members of this side of the House and members of that side of the House, but an exchange of ideas and a difference of opinion, showing me your numbers and I'll show you my numbers. I hear from various young teachers who I advised to be teachers because they were students of mine. I've been in their classrooms, and the proudest day that an old, emphasis, I should say, respected teacher gets is that when someone you taught becomes not only a teacher, but becomes a school principal. So on the day that I went to school as the local MLA, I went to Sir John A. Macdonald High School, where I had the opportunity to be a teacher, and thank you for that quick warning of 1 minute, where I had the opportunity to meet for the day and also, of course, had the occasion to talk to kids and to listen to Albert Rayner and his particular way of looking at teachers and what's going on. And I agree with members opposite who said it's not easy to be a school teacher, but I'll tell you, if you like kids, and I know the member from Kings West and I will agree on this, many other things we agree on aside from a few things of politics, I'll tell you, if you like kids, teaching is the greatest job in the world, and it is also one of the easiest. I know there's other challenges. I know there's other issues. When you balance the NSTU and the school boards and the role of parents and all the issues that are coming forward, I encourage members of this House to continue to participate in debates of this sort and have an idea difference and not a personality one.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Deputy Official Opposition House Leader.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd call resolution number 9.
Resolution number 9. The Honourable, the member for Kings West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thought, first of all, I'd give those who are either watching in the gallery or at home today an idea of what resolution number 9 was all about. Whereas the future growth and success of Nova Scotia depends on the education of our children, and whereas the NDP government has shown no clear direction in managing the public education system, decimating when we need to be building and slashing when we need to be leading. And whereas Nova Scotians are expecting the government to be an education leader, expecting the government to identify education as a priority, provide the best possible education for our children, and therefore be it resolved the NDP government reverse the detrimental cuts to our education system, put an end to balancing the books on the backs of our children. I want to first of all thank the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal for that reference to my previous career, and him and I share many stories and views and perspectives on education,
And we did share for the best part of our work lives the love of teaching young people. In fact, it was very difficult for me to actually think about offering for public life, because in my 25 years at West Kings, I missed 8 days of school. I loved to go to school. I loved to teach young adults, and obviously coaching as well was a big part of that. But we're not here to talk about that today. The reality is, and those like the member from Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, who also a teacher, and a number of others here in the chamber, know the realities of the classroom have changed dramatically. We started our careers at a time when streaming was a part of education, and many children fell by the wayside even before grade 9 or 10, when they had the option of going to vocational school and looking at their future in the trades. Over the last couple of decades, we have embraced the concept of inclusion. And from the very days of bringing inclusion into the public school system, which is one that I agree with both the philosophical and the needs of what inclusion actually requires. And we did have a very difficult time in a province challenged financially to support inclusion to the extent that it needed that kind of support mechanisms to keep as many children in school for as long as humanly possible. And that is why today I disagree with cutting education, because there are still so many needs in the public school system. There are still children who don't get the individualized program that they could truly benefit from. And that's why I think we will find in a decade or so that taking a look at saying we have 30,000 less students in the system, which, by the way, if we add up the classrooms and classes that we offer in our high school, it comes down to about 2 or 3 students per class or classroom. Because in our elementary schools, we move students on a classroom basis. So in many ways, it's almost like back to balance. It is somewhat mythic when we use 30,000 less students as the reason for the kind of cuts that are presently coming. We're at a time when we need, for example, in our elementary schools, now a guidance counselor. I've had a number of calls from actually more through perhaps my critic role in health, wondering what's available to elementary principals and schools to deal with mental health requirements that their student population have. We talk about having a student population that is not very fit, and we don't offer daily physical activity to many of our children, and that should be a basic requirement. And this, especially as we know, from primary to 9, this should be part of the daily life of a student in our school, because they do have a lot of time when they get little or no activity whatsoever. And if we're talking about creating a generation that will take personal responsibility for their health, we must teach them that with good practices through our public education system. So I do lament cuts, and really we need to look at how government spends all of its dollars to weigh whether or not this is the best decision, when we've actually now we're moving into the realm of spending about $400 million on a dying industry. I mean, those are the evaluations that Nova Scotians are making now, not 10 years down the road when we will see the impacts of cuts to education. These will be very detrimental. We know that a big part, when we say education has increased in its spending by 41% over the past decade. Out of that 41%, 28% is very easily seen, and that's the inflationary factor. And we all know that from running our households, that inflation over the past decade has taken a big bite out of spending power if you didn't have commensurate increases in salary. And the other 13%, we have put programs in our school like O2, for example. And anytime we bring those kind of programs in and the resources to teach them, they certainly cost money. The program ESL here in Halifax in particular, to have our immigrant children learn the language early, learn it well, so that they can gain from their time in public education, again, is very often a costly endeavor. So we're starting to, I think, Nova Scotians are starting to take a look at what is happening to our education system. We don't expect it to be like when we went to school. In fact, we expect it really to be more, and to be more accommodating of many, many students. Just taking one area alone, next year, about 60 fully diagnosed autistic children will enter the school system in HRM. That will require, again, a tremendous investment to take those children through the public education system. But if we don't, we end up looking after them perhaps for a lifetime. I visit a small options home in my riding, where there's a man 41 years of age who has a vocab of 10 to 15 words because he has severe autism. And since being 21 years of age, he has been looked after by the province. So if we don't invest now, we will pay a bigger price as we go down the road. So I think we're urging and asking government to make education and public education a much stronger priority than what we have seen over the past couple of years. Our teaching profession is becoming, in fact, very, very concerned about what they are currently having to deal with in terms of some of the deficiencies that they see each day. Mr. Speaker, I think we are on the verge of seeing a profession that, in fact, will take even a stronger stand than what they are currently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's so interesting waiting here to speak. I changed my Mr. Speaker to Madam Speaker and then changed them all back to Mr. Speaker, just so I would get it right. It's a privilege for me to stand here today and speak to opposition business regarding education in Nova Scotia. The whole idea of education now, today, talking about all this and listening to what everyone has had to say, we're looking at a very different playing field. When I was a teacher in the school system, I was an art teacher, and the resources that I had in my classrooms were very different than they are now. Back then, I taught at St. Pat's School on Brunswick Street, and we had what was known then as the Central Ceramic Lab. So as a fine artist, I was in charge of all the art teachers who would come down, and they would book an afternoon, like a Saturday or Friday or a Tuesday, and come down for 6 weeks, and I would teach them as the art teacher. Those sorts of things aren't available today, and there are other ways that children are learning to be creative. One of the things that I wanted to talk about here is that the premise of this resolution, I think there are three main premises, and it calls for a clear direction for public education, that we should agree that our children are the future of the province, and that Nova Scotians deserve a public education system that leads the way to excellence. And I think that those are things that we absolutely are doing now. No, it's not vague. It's very specific what we are doing. Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's a member in the chamber that wouldn't agree with those ideas. And being a mother of grown children, and at some point in the near future, hopefully, I'll have grandchildren, and to be able to enjoy the luxury of that I know a lot of my colleagues brag about. And I can't wait for that. But I know that we all are here to support our children, and yet we're looking at a very different kind of classroom. When I went to Bayview School recently to introduce the Play, Talk, Learn kits, those were met with great enthusiasm by the grade primary teacher in Mahone Bay School. And I had the opportunity to speak to the classroom teacher and the principal said, Pam, when I taught your children, they had different skills than children do now because of the kind of home situation a lot of parents have to deal with. Most parents have 2 incomes that are required. And when my children were little, we didn't have a computer to sit them down in front of. They had to play and interact in very different ways. The whole idea of the Play, Talk, Learn program is to really encourage parents who may not feel really secure in reading to their children at home and interacting at home. And a number of parents were there that day in the classroom, and they were saying this is a wonderful thing for us to be able to have more interaction, and knowing that what they're doing at home will be repeated in the classroom with the teachers. It helped them feel more engaged. Mr. Speaker, the plan that we have, which we have all seen, I'm prepared to say that all of us on our side of the House, and the parents that I talk to and teachers that I talk to, are very enthusiastic. Mr. Speaker, a clear direction involves examination. A clear direction involves examination of where schools have been and what people have done in the past. And when we formed government in 2009, we looked at what we had in front of us, and we realized that the school system was not 100%. As we've said here today many times, the declining enrollment of 30,000 students, we have 30,000 less now than we did 10 years ago. We know that those numbers are imprinted in all of our brains, and yet how that looks and translates into reality is what we're talking about here. Yes, of course, we've got classrooms that are, they're schools that are becoming smaller and smaller because of the people from rural areas coming to urban centers. And yet, what I'm seeing is more and more things are changing. In Mahone Bay, in my little town, the population has gone up 4.3% since the last census. Now that truly only relates to 15 new families moving to Mahone Bay, and yet they are families with young people, and they're coming here from other countries, and coming here, a lot of them from England actually, and they're coming for what Nova Scotia has to offer. They're coming because it's a safe place to live, and their children can grow up in a place where they can interact with people. When our government moved forward with our different programs, the whole idea, of course, is that government faces the reality of today and tomorrow, and is focused on trying to help every student succeed. Mr. Speaker, I certainly don't need to remind you that our province is preparing to welcome the largest economic prosperity that will be soon happening, a lot of it because of the Irving shipyard contract, but many other things that are happening. We've got potential exploration off our shores. We've got, as I said, we've got many things in film tax. We've got a very good film industry, many things that are happening. All those things that will encourage and change things in our economics in the province. Mr. Speaker, Recently, our Premier and the Minister of Education were accompanied by several honourable members to mention the investment in the state-of-the-art Skilled Trades Centre. This centre will offer new manufacturing trade courses, and some of that will be linked with shipbuilding, and others just the trades. I remember when I was in high school, there was an academic stream and a commercial stream. And out of the commercial stream, the community colleges arose, and many will say that have come to a point very much like another university. And trade schools are things that we really are looking for. And the kind of response that I'm hearing around this announcement of this kind of trade school in Halifax and also in Dartmouth and other areas in the province will be certainly welcomed by many people. It is long overdue, and this new centre will help meet the needs of hundreds of students across the Halifax Regional Municipality who are eager to take these skills. The additional investment will support and establish more skilled trade centres across the province so that all students across the province can prepare themselves for the future. To make my point, Mr. Speaker, I believe that in order to lead the way, we first must understand where we are and how we got here. And to help us do this, Mr. Speaker, our government asked someone to help do this, and as we've spoken earlier, Dr. Ben Levin was one of Canada's foremost educators and Canada's research chair in educational leadership at the University of Toronto. Mr. Levin provided his advice and knowledge of jurisdictions across the country and internationally on the best way for Nova Scotians to plan for the future in education. Our Kids and Learning First plan is the culmination of Dr. Levin's recommendations and additional research that it will be needed to help students lead the way. And I, Mr. Speaker, am looking forward to seeing the results of the Succeeding in Reading and how that will be helping students in Mahone Bay School learn the basics and fundamentals of reading in early years. I like the idea that the Succeeding in Reading will expand the number of children that are able to be involved in the process, and as we move forward, it will develop even more so that more children can participate and have that special kind of training. I also look forward to seeing the expanded skills training program in Breton Education Centre in New Waterford and see how that provides learning opportunities for students in Cape Breton. And Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to seeing how the Community Use of School Grants program will help students in our communities enjoy healthy and active living. Mr. Speaker, I understand that our children are our future, and I think we all certainly understand that. By working with children in the teachers in the classroom, all they really want to do is teach. A third of my caucus have been teachers at one point, and we're teachers, parents, friends, aunts, uncles to children and people who are involved in schools. I think by working together, this kind of debate today is very interesting because we're all really on the same path. We're all working for our children. We're all trying to create the best situation for learning that we can. And what more can we do? You know, the idea that children wouldn't be the foremost for all of us, the most important thing, is just unthinkable. We do realize that there will be glitches in any programs that any party puts forward, and yet we're working to smooth those things through by listening to teachers, listening to parents, listening to our students, and watching them flourish and enjoy the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise in my place this evening to talk about resolution number 9. Therefore, be it resolved that the NDP government reverse the detrimental cuts to our education system and put an end to balancing the books on the backs of our children. You know, Mr. Speaker, I listened with interest to the debate on Bill 10 that took place, and I know that the honourable member from Pictou East, in his talk referenced an elephant. Well, Mr. Speaker, my learned colleague from Cape Breton West has a saying. And the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But it seems It seems, Mr. Speaker, that this government is trying to eat the whole elephant at once. Mr. Speaker, over the past number of days, we've heard it over and over again. This government refuses to take responsibility for the cuts that school boards are forced to make. The government needs to be accountable for what's happening in our public education system. They leave school boards very few choices but to cut at the classroom level. Once the result of this government's poor decision-making is known to Nova Scotians, they conveniently step back and blame the school boards. You know, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to attend the Take Your MLA to School Day at Bedeck Academy, a P-12 school in my constituency. And it was truly amazing to see the changes that have happened in our education system and the way we educate our children compared to the time that, for those that don't know, my 15 years on the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board and its predecessor, the Northside Victoria District School Board. There's a lot of changes that have taken place. There's a lot more challenges that are facing the children that are going to school today. Many are taking problems from home to school with them, and they're expected to be looked after, and some of those problems that those children are bringing looked after as well. But this government simply doesn't listen, Mr. Speaker. If they did, they'd hear from the experts, the people on the ground, that what we need to do in our school system. It was referenced numerous times today as well that the Chignecto Central Regional School Board Superintendent Gary Clark describes the cuts that are taking place as ugly, devastating, heartbreaking. And a board member, Ron Merck, says the cuts are going to affect all our children. Parents will be shocked. And Margot Tate, the superintendent of the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board, calls the cuts difficult and at times excruciating. Vic Fleury, president of the Nova Scotia School Boards Association, says that saying that these cuts won't have grave impacts on the classroom is naive. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians of all ages are crying out that these cuts have and will continue to negatively impact students. The government won't listen to the school boards. They won't listen to parents. They won't listen to students. Nova Scotians understand there are fewer children in schools. But what they don't understand is why this government believes our current students are not deserving of a good education. Taking resources away from our students will lead to a lower quality education. It's a proven fact that a quality education leads to a more prosperous, fruitful life. Mr. Speaker, last year, NDP education cuts resulted in a loss of 128 full-time teaching positions and 425 maintenance, consultant, and support staff positions. This year, we're going to see even more cuts. Teachers, teaching assistants, library personnel, IT, property, transportation, and central and regional office staff. Mr. Speaker, education is the key to success. Those who are well educated are more likely to go on to get better jobs, contribute more to society, and lead healthier lives. From an economic perspective, people who have a better education cost the government less. By going on to get a good job, they're able to contribute more in taxes. It's been shown also that people living above the poverty line demand less from our healthcare system. The bottom line is this, Mr. Speaker. The government is taking away great opportunities from our students. By doing this, they're sending those in search of support down a dark path. Rather than make our children pay for their poor decision-making, the government needs to find savings at the top. Making cuts at the front line while inflating their own department is unethical. Ask any Nova Scotian. The most recent budget shows an increase of 553 full-time equivalent positions across government this year. This government supports watching 41 librarians walk out the door in order to put another 41 positions at the Department of Finance. It'd be interesting to see how the students of Chignecto Central handle that information. The fact, Mr. Speaker, is that the government would rather swell their own departments with more bureaucrats than give our kids a quality education. And Mr. Speaker, that is a hard pill to swallow. Mr. Speaker, our children deserve better. More emphasis has to be put in the classroom, not slowly eroding it. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would hope that the government will see the wisdom of their ways and stop making these devastating cuts that are occurring throughout our education system. And Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Speaker, members of this opposition have had to sit in this House and listen from members of the governing party say that, unlike any other government before them, they prioritize education. Yet it's this government, Mr. Speaker, who balked at the previous Minister for Education for increasing funding to education in the province of Nova Scotia, the minister who now sits in this caucus. This government who says, we care more about education than anybody else ever. However, the previous government, who invested a significant amount of dollars in education, that doesn't matter. When you look at the actual actions of this government, Mr. Speaker, it tells a much different story than what they're saying. Because actions speak louder than words and talk is cheap, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, this government has stripped $65 million out of our public education system. $65 million out of it. Yet they'll stand in this House and say that they value education, they care about our youth, and that they're investing in the future. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, that is not true. It's not true. These cuts are having a very deep and real and tangible impact on the classrooms of this province. And if the members opposite don't believe it, I suggest all the ones that didn't participate and take your MLA to school day, take the NSTU up next time they want to do it.
Take a look.
There's a reasons why the member opposite, Mr. Speaker, didn't want to go to schools on Take Your MLA to School Day, because they know what's happening.
Congratulations.
And Mr. Speaker, the damage that is happening in our education system
and hugs and kisses
is being felt the most by those students, Mr. Speaker, those students with special needs in our classroom who need that support the most. I've spoken to parents with children on the autism spectrum. They have noticed already a regression in the learning abilities of their kids. A regression already. That's a real impact that these cuts are having on the classroom. That's happening across the province, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful. And it's unbelievable that this government will still stand up and say, no, we care about education, we care about our youth, when they're putting the future of our youth in jeopardy, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, actually, to finish, I'll quote the late Honorable Jack Layton. What this government is doing with education is a hashtag fail, Mr. Speaker. Right. And I will add, it's a hashtag unequivocal fail to our students, to our teachers, to their parents, and to the future of this province, Mr. Speaker. And it's shameful, and I hope they change the course soon.
Hey, good job.
Order. The time allotted for debate has ended. I will now recognize the House Leader for the official opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that, and I certainly want to thank all members of the House for their participation in the debate today, and I would now turn it over to the Government House Leader to give us the business for tomorrow.
Thank you. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, wish the House to now rise to meet from the hours tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And after the daily routine, we will do Committee of the Whole House on Supply, and time permitting, bills for second reading, Bill 5, Bill 9, Bill 11, and Bill 13. I wish you to now rise, Mr. Speaker.
The motion before the House is that we now rise and meet again tomorrow from the hours of 2 till 10 p.m. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion has carried. We are adjourned until 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We have now reached the time of interruption, and the subject for tonight's late debate is therefore be it resolved that with the announcement of a high school in Eastern Passage and expanded capacity in Cole Harbour High to train young people in skilled trades, this government is showing its commitment to putting kids and learning first, and it's been submitted by the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's certainly my pleasure to stand before the House today to speak about the tremendous investment that this government is making in the community of Eastern Passage and for the constituency of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage in so many ways. In the high school for Eastern Passage and a skilled trades development of a skilled trade centre in the Cole Harbour District High School. Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise that unfortunately that the opposition members are in this House on a number of occasions since that announcement, expressing unequivocally and very openly that they are against a high school for Eastern Passage. It's no surprise that for so many years past governments have neglected that community. But those days are over, Mr. Speaker. We have a government that is putting kids in learning first and communities' needs for their families and their students front and foremost. Two significant announcements, Mr. Speaker, equally exciting, and I'm proud to be part of them for different reasons. And I'm going to start with the constituency of Cole Harbour and the opportunities that Nova Scotians will now have in looking for a future in the skilled trades. They've never been greater. The $25 billion shipbuilding contract awarded to Irving Shipyard is truly an economic game changer for Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and it's expected to generate millions in economic spin-offs and 11,000 jobs. And our government want our youth to stay in Nova Scotia, to train to get those jobs. Our NDP government is making strategic investments and purposeful and responsible investments in skilled trades. The announcement at Cole Harbour District High to renovate to create a state-of-the-art skilled trade centre is welcome news for so many people around HRM, students. I was there, Mr. Speaker. I was there along with the Premier, along with the Minister of Education, and I heard the cheers. I saw the faces of the youth that knew that a new chapter was opening for Cole Harbour District High, and that's exciting. Students and staff and administration were thrilled to hear about the upgrades that were forthcoming with this investment. It turns a page in history and offers an opportunity for people to look to go to Cole Harbour District High, look for the good news and the great things that are happening at it. And it helps meet the needs of the students that increase